Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you could join me for this journey. And now, let's begin.
I've always been one of those people who reads the fine print. While others skim through contracts and trust deals on a handshake, I study every clause, every possible scenario, every probable outcome. This has served me well for all of my 36 years. First in my work as a civil engineer, where overlooking details can cause buildings to collapse, and later in life, where overlooking details can destroy everything else. 7 years ago, I met Laura Brooks at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends. She was 27 at the time and shone so brightly that all conversations in the room inevitably gravitated towards the sound of her voice. Working as an executive assistant at Meridian Investment Group in the city center, she had a magnetic attraction, a sharp mind, an infectious laugh, and an ambition that lit up her dark eyes when she spoke about her career goals. I was captivated immediately. I had bought my house 3 years before meeting Laura, a solid 3-bedroom colonial in Maplewood with great potential. The previous owners had let it go, so I got it below market value. I saw what others missed: the original hardwood floors under the worn-out carpet, the structural integrity behind the cosmetic damage, the investment potential where others saw only problems. Only my name was on the deed, my down payment, saved over years of frugality, my equity, built through weekend renovations. I learned to lay bathroom tile and restore floors from YouTube videos through trial and error. Our courtship was passionate and deliberate. Laura was drawn to my stability, the steady income, the owned home, the man who had his life planned out 5 years in advance. I was intoxicated by her energy, her ease in navigating social situations that drained me, her dreams of career heights I hadn't even seen. With her, I felt more interesting than I ever had before. After 18 months, I proposed at the Laloon restaurant where we had our third date. She said yes before I could even finish the question, tears streaming down her face, and she immediately called her sister from the table to share the news. We planned a fall wedding, and Laura dove into the details with her characteristic passion. 2 months before the ceremony, I brought up the topic of a prenuptial agreement. We were having dinner at home. I had made a roast using my grandmother's recipe, Laura's favorite dish. When I slid the folder across our kitchen table, she looked at it as if I had placed a dead animal between the salt and pepper shakers. "What's this?" she asked, her eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "Just some documents," I replied calmly. "Protection for both of us, in case anything goes wrong." Laura laughed, almost scoffed, shook her head, and opened the folder. "You're so paranoid, Daniel. But I guess that's what makes you a good engineer," she said with a smile. She flipped through the pages without really reading them, stopping only at the signature lines. "It's sweet in a way," she continued. "You care enough about our future to worry about protecting it?" I watched as she signed each page. Her signature was sprawling and confident. She didn't ask about the specific clauses. She didn't ask her lawyer to review the terms. She didn't linger on the section that would become the most important 7 years later. Any proven infidelity by either party immediately forfeits all rights to property acquired before or during the marriage. "There," she said cheerfully, handing the folder back to me. "Satisfied?" "Yes," I simply replied. "Satisfied." Our 7 years together unfolded like a carefully drafted blueprint. Laura's promotions were steady: senior assistant, then executive coordinator, then client relations manager. My own career progressed in parallel. Project engineer, senior engineer, construction manager. We developed our own rhythm. Saturday trips to the farmer's market, Sunday home improvement projects. Annual trips to Laura's family in California. Quiet evenings when she worked on her laptop and I sketched building structures at the kitchen table. We didn't have children yet. We had agreed to wait until Laura reached upper management and we could afford the lifestyle she envisioned for our family. She was methodical in her career advancement, building connections at corporate events with the focus of a general planning, a campaign strategy. I admired her determination, her ability to charm executives twice her age, her refusal to accept limitations others tried to impose on her. All those 7 years, I believed I knew my wife completely. I was wrong about many things, but I was right about the prenuptial agreement. 6 months ago, Laura started coming home smelling of a cologne I didn't wear. At first, it was barely noticeable. A faint trail on her jackets, something expensive and masculine that lingered in the air when she kissed my cheek at the front door. When I mentioned it, she brushed it off. I'm in tight meetings all day, in cramped conference rooms with top executives who probably bathe in designer perfumes. But that was just the beginning. Laura started dressing differently for work. Designer items appeared in our closet: silk blouses from Theory, high-heeled shoes made of Italian leather that cost more than her monthly car payment, jewelry I certainly didn't buy, a delicate gold chain that caught the light when she gestured, pearl earrings that gave her an unaccustomed sophistication, a pendant with a small diamond that sat perfectly in the hollow of her neck. "New jewelry?" I asked one morning, watching her fasten a bracelet. "From Victor," she replied indifferently, not meeting my gaze in the bathroom mirror. A bonus for successfully closing the H. Hartwell deal. Victor Kane. The name of her boss, which I'd maybe heard a couple of times in 7 years of marriage, suddenly started appearing in every other sentence she uttered. Victor needs me to review the Berkeley portfolio, she'd announce. Victor wants me at a client dinner on Thursday, she'd explain, canceling our plans. Victor says I'm the best relationship manager he's ever worked with, she'd remark with obvious pride. Her voice changed when she said his name. It became softer, almost reverent, as if she were talking about someone who had personally hung the stars in her sky. Late nights started happening exponentially. A big project became her standard explanation for everything. Missed dinners, canceled weekend plans, the growing distance between us that I felt like watching someone slowly walk away until they disappeared completely. She'd return after 10 p.m., plead exhaustion, pick at the reheated meals I left for her in the refrigerator. Her phone became a fortress, a new password, changed without explanation. The screen always faced down during conversations. She took it with her to the bathroom when she showered, something she hadn't done in all 7 years together. Notifications were set to hidden, so I didn't see message previews when the phone vibrated on the kitchen countertop. When I called her during work hours, she'd decline the calls or send them to voicemail, replying hours later with a brief, "In a meeting, talk tonight." But in the evenings, we no longer talked. The intimacy between us faded slowly, then all at once. Laura stopped initiating affection herself, stopped reaching for my hand at the movies, stopped snuggling up to me in bed on Sunday mornings. When I tried to bridge the growing gap between us, she cited a headache or fatigue. "I'm just so tired lately," she'd murmur, turning away from me in bed. When she did acquiesce to my attempts at closeness, it was mechanical. Her body was present, but her mind was clearly elsewhere, staring at the ceiling as if counting a shopping list instead of connecting with her husband. She stopped asking about my projects, stopped laughing at my dry remarks about colleagues, stopped being interested in the little rituals we had built over 7 years. Sunday coffee in bed, Friday takeout dinners while watching documentaries, how we usually debriefed the week over a shared dinner and real conversation. I found myself lying awake at night, listening to her breathing beside me, and feeling as if a stranger had crept into my bed and my life. The woman who used to tell me everything now shared nothing. The wife who used to ask my opinion on work decisions now made them, which I learned about after the fact, if at all. 4 months after these changes began, I considered talking to her directly. But my engineering mind rejected that approach. Too many variables. Too much risk of her covering her tracks or convincing me I was paranoid. If Laura was cheating, a direct question would only teach her to be more careful. I needed proof. I needed certainty. I called Raymond Cross on Tuesday morning. He was recommended by a colleague from my friend's divorce law firm. A private investigator, 20 years of experience, guaranteed confidentiality. We met at a downtown coffee shop during my lunch break. I handed him a photo of Laura across the small table. "I think my wife is cheating," I stated without emotion. "I need to know for sure." Raymond studied the picture. Laura was laughing at dinner on our last anniversary, radiant and happy, looking at me as if I were the only person in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Work schedule? Usual routes?" he asked professionally. I gave him all the information. Her office address, usual hours, those mysterious late meetings that seemed to happen every Tuesday and Thursday. Raymond quoted his rates: $3,000 up front, detailed reports, photo evidence if available. I paid in cash. "How long do you want me to work on this?" he inquired. "Until you find proof of her affair," I replied firmly. "Or until I'm convinced I'm wrong." It took Raymond 3 weeks. The photos arrived via encrypted email on a Tuesday evening, while Laura was again working late. I opened them alone in my home office. Each image was a systematic destruction of my marriage. Laura and Victor Kane kissing in a parking lot, her hands tangled in his graying hair. Them entering the Grand View Hotel together, his hand possessively on the small of her back. Them sitting in close proximity at Mercato, an expensive Italian restaurant, his thumb stroking her wrist as she looked at him like a lovesick teenager. I looked at the evidence for a full hour, my face impassive, my engineering mind already switching from grief to calculation. Then I called Margaret Sinclair, the best divorce lawyer in the city. I didn't tell Laura about the photos. Instead, I started installing cameras in every room of our house. If Victor Kane wanted to destroy my marriage, I would make sure the whole world saw it happening. The 2 weeks after Raymond's report became the most controlled performance of my life. Every morning I woke up next to Laura, kissed her forehead, and asked about her day with the same gentle care I had shown for 7 years. "Sleep well?" I'd ask quietly. "Big day ahead?" she'd reply with distracted nods, already checking her phone for messages from Victor. Every evening I listened to her elaborate lying stories about demanding clients and urgent projects, nodding with sympathy while mentally calculating her financial risks. "Victor needs me to stay late again," she'd announce. "Of course," I'd reply understandingly. "Work comes first." I cooked dinners she barely touched, watched shows she paid no attention to, maintained the illusion of normalcy with the precision of a method actor playing the most important role of his career. Behind the scenes, I worked with Margaret Sinclair to build an unassailable case. Margaret reviewed the prenuptial agreement with the meticulousness of a forensic accountant. The document had been drafted by the firm Bailey, Klein, and Associates 7 years ago, one of the best in the city for family law. Ironically, every clause was enforceable, every possible scenario legally sound. The infidelity clause was clear and devastating. Any proven affair immediately forfeited rights to assets acquired before or during the marriage. "This is bulletproof," Margaret declared, sliding the contract back across her mahogany desk. "Your wife will leave with exactly what she brought into the marriage, with her personal belongings and that Honda Civic. Everything else stays with you." I filed for divorce 2 weeks after receiving the evidence from Raymond. Margaret cited irreconcilable differences in the official documents but attached the proof of infidelity in sealed court filings. The hearing date was set for 90 days later. Standard procedure. Laura wasn't due to be served the papers for another month. A strategic delay recommended by Margaret to prevent any potential attempts by Laura to hide assets or prepare a defense. During this period, I installed a comprehensive security system throughout our house. High-resolution cameras in the living room, kitchen, hallway, and at the front door. Cloud storage with motion activation, and a live feed to my phone. When the security service technician asked about such extensive coverage, I calmly explained. "Worried about recent break-ins in the neighborhood." "Smart," he replied, not knowing how smart it really was. I documented our joint assets with meticulous detail. Bank statements from the last 7 years, investment portfolio summaries, retirement account balances, a recent home appraisal showing $300,000 in equity, receipts for all major purchases, proof of my sole ownership of the property. Margaret compiled it all into an impregnable financial fortress that would withstand any challenge from any lawyer Laura could hire. Then, I made a calculated decision that revealed the true scale of my planning. I reached out to the HR department at Meridian Investment Group, not to file a formal complaint. That would be too obvious and traceable back to me. But I had Raymond send an anonymous tip about potential ethical violations involving senior management and subordinates, suggesting they investigate Victor Kane's professional conduct regarding certain employees. Investment firms live in fear of liability lawsuits, sexual harassment accusations, scandals from office affairs. Any of it could trigger regulatory scrutiny and huge financial losses. HR departments at firms like Meridian don't ignore anonymous tips. They investigate them with the paranoia of people whose bonuses depend on avoiding scandal. I also began careful social preparation, casually mentioning at dinners with mutual friends that Laura seems stressed lately. "I'm worried about her workload," I'd confide over dinner with our friends Mark and Sarah. "Just hope our marriage can survive her increasingly demanding career." "You're such a supportive husband," Sarah would reply sympathetically. "Laura's lucky to have you." If only she knew. My emotional state during this preparation phase surprised me. I expected rage, devastation, the classic stages of grief. Instead, I felt a strange calm, almost clinical. The grief will come later, I told myself. For those 2 weeks, I felt like I was back in college solving a complex engineering problem. Variables, constraints, optimization, finding the most efficient path to the desired outcome. The only difference was that the stakes weren't a grade, but my entire life. I spent evenings in the home office, reviewing divorce documents and surveillance reports while Laura worked late with her lover 20 floors above downtown. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was building her new life while I was systematically dismantling the old one, and neither of us knew what the other was doing. One evening, sitting at the desk reviewing the financial reports Margaret had prepared, I realized I felt no guilt for what was about to happen. Laura had made her choices, fully aware of their potential consequences. Victor had entered someone else's marriage with arrogance and a sense of entitlement, believing the methodical husband would simply step aside in the face of his superior charm and financial power. They were both about to learn what happens when you underestimate a man who always reads the fine print. Laura came home that night after 11, distractedly kissed my cheek, and disappeared upstairs. I watched her go, then returned to my laptop, where the latest photos from Raymond awaited. Laura and Victor that same evening laughing over a glass of wine in the bar of the Grandview Hotel, her hand on his thigh, looking happier than I'd seen her in months. I closed the laptop and whispered into the empty room, "One more week. On a Tuesday evening, exactly 3 weeks after I'd filed for divorce, Laura walked through our front door holding Victor Kane's hand. He had come to my house to take my wife. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. I was reading a structural engineering magazine on the living room couch when I heard the key turn in our door lock. 8:47 p.m. later than usual for her client meetings. Then I heard something that made my pulse quicken. 2 pairs of footsteps. The cameras were recording. Laura entered first, and behind her, holding her hand with casual possessiveness, was Victor Kane. I recognized him immediately from Raymond's photos. About 6'2", broad shoulders filling out an expensive charcoal suit, graying hair styled with the precision of a man who had never been denied in his privileged life. He scanned my living room with a gaze that barely concealed contempt, like a developer inspecting a property he plans to demolish. I looked up from my magazine, neatly placed it on the coffee table. "Can I help you?" I asked calmly. Victor laughed, actually laughed, and walked deeper into my living room without an invitation. His confidence was staggering, the arrogance of a man used to taking whatever he wanted simply because he wanted it. "Actually, yes," he replied with a condescending smirk. "I'm here to talk to you about Laura." His tone was as if he were explaining basic math to a child. Victor sat down on my couch, sprawling against the backrest as if he already owned the furniture, and delivered his speech with the casual cruelty of a man who had clearly rehearsed these words. "Look, Daniel," he continued, "we both know this marriage has run its course. Laura deserves more than this." He waved a dismissive hand towards our home. "Me. 7 years of shared life. And I'm here to do the right thing. I'm asking you to let her go, cleanly. No hard feelings." Laura stood beside him, her chin raised, trying to project confidence, but her eyes betrayed nervousness. She was wearing her best dress for the occasion, I noticed. The black one I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The symbolism seemed intentional. "It's time to stop pretending, Daniel," she added, and her voice had a rehearsed maturity to it. "You and I have been over for a long time. We both know it." I let them finish their prepared speeches. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen where I had prepared a folder envelope that morning, and returned. I tossed it onto the coffee table between them with a heavy thud that echoed in the sudden silence. "What is this?" Laura asked, her confidence cracking like ice under pressure. "Private investigator's report," I replied in an icy voice. "Photos, videos, timestamps, witness statements. You two have been fucking for the last 3 months, mostly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The Grandview Hotel, room 412. You're creatures of habit." Victor's smirk evaporated like smoke. Laura paled. Her hand reached for the envelope but then jerked back as if it might burst into flames. I continued, each word a precise blow, calculated for maximum damage. "I filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. The prenuptial agreement you signed, Laura, the one you couldn't be bothered to read, clearly states that infidelity forfeits all rights to marital assets. You get nothing. Not the house, not the savings, not the retirement funds. You will leave this marriage exactly as you entered it, with your car and your clothes." Laura tried to stand, panic overwhelming her carefully constructed composure. "Daniel, wait," she pleaded desperately. "We can talk about this. Sit down," I commanded sharply. The authority in my voice made her collapse back onto the couch as if her strings had been cut. I turned to Victor, and the temperature in the room dropped to Arctic. "And you," I said coldly. "You've trespassed on private property. These cameras," I pointed to the security system in the living room, "are recording everything. You entered my home uninvited and tried to intimidate me into giving up my wife. That's unlawful entry, harassment, and depending on how I present it to the police, possibly extortion." Victor stood up, trying to reclaim a dominant position through sheer physical presence. "I didn't threaten you," he protested. "You demanded I hand my wife over to you," I interrupted. "In my home, after you've been fucking her behind my back for 3 months. That is absolutely a threat." Victor stepped forward, looming over me, puffing out his chest like a territorial animal. "You think you scare me?" he sneered arrogantly. "I make in a month what you make in a year. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll destroy—" I moved. The first move was precise. With both hands, I grabbed Victor's expensive lapels and slammed him into the wall with such force that the plaster cracked. His head snapped back, leaving a small dent in the drywall. Before he could recover from the shock, I delivered a punch to his solar plexus, a calculated blow that drove every molecule of air from his lungs and left him gasping like a fish out of water. Victor doubled over, wheezing, and I brought my knee up with all the force of 7 years of suppressed rage, hitting him in the ribs. A crunch was audible. Victor crumpled, and I followed him down, delivering a vicious kick to his groin that made him curl into a fetal position on my hardwood floors, tears streaming down his face. All arrogance was wiped away in 30 seconds of controlled violence. "Daniel, stop!" Laura screamed, grabbing my arm. I pushed her away, not cruelly but firmly, so she stumbled back, bumping into the coffee table. I stood over Victor, my breathing even, my knuckles split and bleeding, looking down at the man who thought he could walk into someone's home and steal whatever he fancied. "Get out of my house now," I ordered coldly. Victor tried to crawl towards the front door, whimpering pathetically, clutching his ribs and groin, transformed into a broken shell of the confident predator who'd entered my home 20 minutes earlier. Laura rushed to help him, both now sobbing, all pretense shattered, the ugly reality of their situation finally penetrating their illusory bubble. I picked up the divorce papers from the side table and threw them at Laura's feet. "Sign them," I instructed firmly. "Don't contest it. The evidence is irrefutable, and you can't win." Laura sank to her knees beside Victor, supporting him, her mascara running in black tears down her face. "Daniel, please," she begged desperately. "We can work something out." "Oh, and one more thing," I announced, crossing my arms almost casually. "I sent the full investigation report to your company's HR department this morning. Detailed evidence of your affair, including documentation proving Victor used corporate resources, expense accounts, client dinners, business trips to facilitate your relationship. They'll be calling you both in tomorrow. Office romances between management and subordinates violate Meridian's ethics code." I checked. Laura's face completely distorted. Victor groaned, barely conscious, probably concussed. They hobbled towards the door, Victor leaning heavily on Laura, leaving small drops of blood on my immaculate hardwood floors. I followed them, opened the door, and watched as they stumbled down the porch steps. Victor could barely walk. Laura was sobbing hysterically, trying to support his weight while simultaneously fumbling for her phone. I closed the door, bolted it, and went to the kitchen. I poured myself 2 fingers of Jameson whiskey and sat at the kitchen table, my hands slightly shaking from adrenaline, but my face was completely calm. My phone vibrated. A message from Margaret Sinclair. "Papers served. She has 30 days to respond. Judging by the live feed from your security system, I don't think she'll contest." I allowed myself a smile. The next morning, Laura and Victor learned that destroying a marriage has far-reaching consequences, extending far beyond the living room. The morning after the confrontation, both Laura and Victor received calls from Brenda Lawson, head of HR and legal compliance at Meridian Investment Group. Neither knew the other was also being called. Neither suspected the systemic destruction about to unfold. Margaret got the details through court documents and discreet inquiries Raymond made through his contacts in the financial district. The world of investment is surprisingly small, and scandals spread quickly. Brenda sat across from Laura in a sterile conference room at exactly 9 a.m., a thick folder My Investigation report, meticulously organized and legally devastating lying between them. Brenda's expression was professional but cold, the look of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. "We have received comprehensive evidence of an office romance between you and Victor Kane, which violates company policy," Brenda began without preamble, her voice clinical. "The evidence includes photographs, hotel records, expense report violations, and witness statements over the last 3 months." Laura tried to explain, stammering nervously. "It's not what it seems. It's recent, and it doesn't affect my work." "Mr. Kane used corporate credit cards for personal dinners with you," Brenda interrupted sharply. "He approved expense reports for trips where you shared accommodations. He gave you bonuses and promotions that, upon our review, were not merited. This creates enormous liability risks for the firm. Sexual harassment lawsuits, favoritism, financial misconduct." A parallel conversation with Victor was happening simultaneously in another conference room. He tried to overwhelm her with threats, threatening legal action. "This is harassment," he declared indignantly. "I've been with this company for 15 years, which makes your behavior even more unforgivable," Brenda replied coldly. "You knew better." "Effective immediately," she continued, addressing them both in separate rooms. "You are terminated for gross violation of our ethics code and standards of professional conduct. Security will escort you out. You have 1 hour to collect personal belongings. Your final paychecks will be mailed. Any attempt to contact clients or employees will result in a lawsuit for corporate espionage." Their walk of shame became legendary in downtown business circles. Both, escorted by security, walked through the main office during peak hours, carrying boxes of personal effects while hundreds of colleagues watched in stunned silence. Phones appeared, taking pictures, sending messages. By lunchtime, the story had spread to every investment firm in the city. "Did you hear about Victor and Laura?" a junior analyst whispered to his cubicle neighbor. "An affair," the colleague replied, not looking up from his screen. Everyone's talking about it. Corporate cards, hotel rooms, the whole deal. Career suicide, concluded the first. No one will touch them after this. The destruction of Victor's career was particularly impressive. As a senior vice president, his career was built on reputation and connections. In the tight-knit world of high finance, rumors travel at light speed. Other firms learned about the ethics breach, the termination, the sordid circumstances. Doors began closing before Victor even had a chance to start calling his professional contacts. When he reached out to a former colleague from Goldman Sachs, the response was swift and harsh. "Sorry, Victor, but we can't take on that kind of risk," his contact explained awkwardly. "You understand?" Laura faced similar professional isolation, but with added social judgment. She was the subordinate in this affair, which in the twisted logic of office gossip made her more culpable. Other executive assistants distanced themselves from her. Her carefully built network of contacts evaporated overnight. Meanwhile, my divorce proceeded with mechanical efficiency. Margaret filed motions, presented overwhelming evidence, and Laura's lawyer, a court-appointed one, an overworked public defender she could barely afford without her Meridian salary, advised her not to contest the case. "The prenuptial agreement is unassailable," he told her during their brief consultation, shaking his head. "The photo evidence is overwhelming. You signed this agreement voluntarily, with the opportunity to consult independent counsel. You will lose, and fighting will cost you money you don't have." "But surely there's something," Laura began desperately. "Nothing," he replied firmly. "Your husband played this perfectly." 60 days after the confrontation, the divorce was finalized. I kept the house, all savings accounts, all retirement funds, all investments. Laura received her personal belongings, her Honda Civic with 18 payments left, and exactly nothing more. 7 years of marriage, and she walked away with less than she came in with, because she now had legal debts she couldn't pay. The final collapse of Laura and Victor's relationship followed predictably. Without jobs, without money, without the forbidden thrill of secrecy that had fueled their affair, their love evaporated like morning mist. They argued constantly in her cramped studio apartment. "This is your fault," Victor accused bitterly. "You should have been more careful." "My fault?" Laura retorted bitterly. "You were the one who insisted on using corporate cards for everything." "You could have said no," he replied coldly. "You could have kept it in your pants," she shot back. Margaret gleefully included their mutual accusations in the court documents as evidence of their complete lack of remorse. Less than 2 months after the confrontation, Victor and Laura broke up in a screaming match in the parking lot of Laura's new studio. Victor moved to Phoenix, taking a contract job paying 60% of his previous salary, unable to get a reference from any firm in our city. Laura moved to Denver, working administrative jobs for a third of her Meridian income, starting from absolute zero at 34 years old. That chapter closed for me with the arrival of the final divorce decree in the mail. I neatly filed it in my home office, poured myself a drink, and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, not even relief, only silence. 6 months later, I realized I hadn't thought about Laura for several weeks. That's when I knew I had truly won. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I'm sitting on the back porch on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint my well-kept yard in gold and amber. The house is fully mine again. Quiet, clean, peaceful, as it hadn't been for years. I've repainted the walls, replaced the furniture Laura chose, made the space mine again. The anger that sustained me during the investigation and confrontation has faded, replaced by something softer. Acceptance, perhaps, or simply indifference. Laura is a closed chapter, filed away like the divorce decree in my office. My life has moved forward deliberately. I got a promotion 3 months ago, senior project manager, leading the firm's largest infrastructure contract. My colleagues respect me. Rumors about my divorce spread quietly but without judgment. In their world of engineers and contracts, my methodical approach to dissolving the marriage only confirmed what they already knew. Daniel Hayes thinks ahead. I'm dating again. Nothing serious, nothing rushed. Claire, a landscape architect I met through mutual friends. She's divorced too. Funny, kind, and refreshingly straightforward. We go for walks, cook dinners together, share stories about our cautious returns to vulnerability. I notice I'm laughing more, sleeping better, remembering what it feels like to be at peace. My colleague Jason asked me once at lunch, "So whatever happened to Laura anyway?" I shrugged, took a bite of my sandwich. "She left," I simply replied. "That's all that matters. I never think about her anymore, and when I do, It's with the detached curiosity one might feel towards a stranger whose life once briefly intersected with one's own. Meanwhile, 800 miles away from me, in Denver, Laura sits in a cramped studio, scrolling through old photos on her phone late at night when she can't sleep, pictures of the house she lost, the life she destroyed, the confident woman she was when she thought she was untouchable. She tried to contact me once, 3 months after the divorce, a long email with apologies, explanations, pleas for acknowledgement. I blocked her address immediately. She tried to contact Victor. He never replied. She works as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized logistics company, earning barely enough for rent and groceries. She's lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, developed insomnia, sees a therapist on a sliding scale. Every night she thinks about the prenuptial agreement she didn't bother to read carefully, the man she completely underestimated, and the choices that cost her everything. I'm in my home office, reviewing blueprints for a new project when my phone vibrates. A message from Claire. Want to get dinner tonight? I smile, type back, yes, looking forward to it, and return to work. People sometimes ask me if I regret how it ended, if I think I went too far, if I feel guilty for so completely destroying Laura's life. I don't. She made her choice. Victor made his. I just made sure they faced the consequences. And now, sitting in the house I built, with a life rebuilt on my own terms, I sleep perfectly fine at night. Because in the end, I didn't just win a divorce. I reclaimed my dignity, my peace, and my future. And no one, not an arrogant boss, not an unfaithful wife, not betrayal, could take that from me.